Who gets access to Idaho water and who doesn't has been an historical headache for farmers. This week, managers of that resource have been considering cutting it off for some. Well, tonight we hear from one caught in the crosshairs. A different kind of battle we've covered for years, the fight over Interfaith Sanctuary's new location on State Street. Well, they've secured the spot. Now they're getting more of the money to make it happen.
My attorneys had warned them about this, but apparently they didn't take it to heart.
The last man Idaho tried to put to death speaks for the first time since that failed attempt in February. Thomas Creech explains what that moment was like and why his, quote, bad veins were well known.
We may have gone up to the cliff and looked over, but nobody wants to jump yet.
Well, not yet. It's a question, or a series of them, that has hung over farmers in Idaho for decades. So I guess we can give it attention for a few days here on the 208. Where's the water? Is there enough of it? And who has the right to use it? In the Gem State, it's a matter of first in time, first in rights. And there are two categories to these rights. The surface water users, those who rely on canals for water, they are usually users with a longer legacy. Then there are the groundwater users, those that have to tap the water under the ground, kind of like the aquifer. They are generally the new kids on the rural route block. Well, this summer, the groundwater users are at the center of a dust-up, with some farmers facing curtailment. This means the Department of Water Resources is threatening to shut off their access to water because, well, they're not in compliance with an 8-year-old statewide agreement. Joe, you've been kind of watching this the last couple of days. This curtailment would impact about 500,000 acres of farmland. You spoke with one of those men, well, one of those farmers, someone connected to all that land today. What are they looking to see? What do they want to have happen?
Well, in the short term, they want a solution that involves no curtailment, and that's going to be likely the solution that we get out of these short-term negotiations. But long-term, there's a lot of more questions, and there's a fantastic question of what do we do after we get through the current impasse to have a lasting solution. The problem, the Eastern Snake Plain Aquifer, it has been declining since the 1950s, and that's when groundwater pumping really started to increase for irrigation. This has reduced aquifer levels and spring flows that feed into those surface water sources. There's also a disagreement on how mitigation efforts should address it all. We heard from the groundwater perspective just today. Groundwater users in portions of Idaho remain in limbo as negotiations continue to avoid a water curtailment.
It would absolutely devastate us. It'd put us under.
Adam Young is a third-generation farmer out of Blackfoot, Idaho. For 70 years, the family farm has been in business. The fear is that curtailment or the shutting down of water could bring extinction. For now, Young continues his daily work, but knows there is a potential shutoff looming. He, too, received a curtailment order.
Well, I mean, effectively, we don't really have any other choice, because to say we're going to put an end to our season right now is to say we're going to put an end to our farm permanently.
So immediately, we want to solve the curtailment.
TJ Budge is general counsel for Idaho Groundwater Appropriators. He explains their current perspective.
It's really a philosophical disagreement as to how the state should manage its resource. We're in an era of diminishing water supplies from climate change and other factors, and we want to continue to sustain our economy. And there's a difference as to how we do that most effectively.
A mitigation plan was most recently drafted in 2015 and put into action the following year. Groundwater users share a perspective that the plan is now outdated, needing a change in how impact to surface water users with more senior rights are measured and reflected in mitigation efforts.
We ought to use modern technology to manage the resource better. We ought to become more efficient in how we use the resource. So we think there's a lot of things that can be done that are better for the public, better for the state, keeps the seniors in business. So we understand that they need to be able to irrigate their crops. We think we can do that in a way that keeps a lot more farmland in production.
The Idaho Department of Water Resources informed groundwater users that mitigation was needed this season. It pairs with the 2016 state plan that requires groundwater reductions of 240,000 acre-feet per year. There are critics of the groundwater users who point out the laws and regulations are what they are, and there is a violation happening whether you like the existing system or not. A point from groundwater users. They believe the calculations from the 2016 agreement are now off.
We know more about how the aquifer works and how it interacts with the river. Some of the assumptions that went into the 2015 agreement didn't hold true, and we've got to respond to that and figure out how to manage our resource most effectively to meet the water needs of the seniors in a way that keeps farmland in production, and that's our mission.
It has never been the position of any of us that we do not have any obligation either to the aquifer or to ensure that senior water right holders are not harmed by shortages. We understand that we are junior. We understand that we need to be able to work together to come up with solutions that can ensure water supply to farmers with senior water rights. But we also need to do that in a way that doesn't put half of the state out of business.
The timing of the curtailment order is also a point of contention. There's an understanding of the laws and authority from state officials, but in reality, they believe it just isn't feasible according to the groundwater perspective.
I mean, you can't do that without losing everything. The timing of it is terrible.
We understand prior appropriation. We understand that the seniors need to have enough water to irrigate their crops. How we go about achieving that, there's more than one way to do it. And that's the heart of the conflict. We don't think escalating dry ups is the right way to do it.
For now, complicated negotiations continue. There is optimism a short-term solution is close. There's also a commitment to creating a lasting one, too.
And we've had assurance from the governor and other leaders of the state that they recognize the 2016 agreement is showing its age, it's no longer workable, and we've got to come up with a better path forward. And so we're going to take them at their word. And we're doing our best to try to solve 24 with a process to change course going forward. We cannot be here next year.
To be extremely clear, this is just one of many perspectives, dozens or even hundreds. But the farmer you heard from, Adam Young, he tells me that junior groundwater users are more than willing to go to the table for more solutions, and they're more than willing to pay their fair share for those solutions. Brian, the question is, what do those solutions look like? The truth is there are so many different stakeholders that not everybody's going to be happy at the end of this.
And I assume these agreements that come up, like 6 years ago, or whatever, they don't have a shelf life of 10 to 20 years. So these are issues that are going to have to be addressed on a more frequent basis because of climate change, I'm guessing.
And the technology to measure it also changes. At the same time, though, there are people in the surface water camp that say, look, the time to negotiate was last fall. Why is this coming up now? So there's a big debate to be had. The short-term goal, though, is to make sure that no one has their water shut off.
We'll see what happens. Thanks, Joe. Boise's Interfaith Sanctuary has been helping people and families experiencing homelessness in the Treasure Valley for almost 2 decades. And for the last several years, they've been looking for help in securing a new home for themselves. A new location with more room for more amenities to help more people. They believe they found that with the old Salvation Army building on West State Street. But that didn't come without a lot of pushback from the neighbors. In the end, the city sided with the shelter and gave them a go-ahead to turn the old warehouse and thrift store into a facility 4 times the size of where they are now. But there was another problem. Because that process took so long, costs of construction have gone up, putting a pause on the remodel, well, until they could raise more money. Well, they raised a good chunk, which allowed them to start the demo 2 months ago. An $8.1 million loan secured today, though, well, that's going to go a long way toward their fundraising goal of $15 million. Aspen Shumpert tells us why Heritage Bank put their money and their faith in Interfaith.
The longtime Interfaith Sanctuary project for a new shelter will get to the finish line. After pushback from neighbors and project delays, the city approved the shelter in April of 2022 at the former Salvation Army location on State Street.
It was really clear that that was the right space to try and create this shelter. It had a great location. It had great bones for creating a bigger, safer, more secured space.
Interfaith Sanctuary has spent the last 2 years trying to fundraise $15.6 million for the project. They raised about $9.6 million in donations, and that helped them to be able to start the project this April. But they still needed to secure an additional $8 million to make sure the shelter could be finished. On Tuesday, Heritage Bank gave them that last piece and finalized a construction loan to take the project to the end.
Heritage Bank cared about the project. They saw that it was essential. They realized that we were a tricky partner, but they were willing to figure out how to make it work.
She says being able to create a campus-like shelter is a game changer. Their guests, now at different locations, will be back all on one property. 42,500 square feet and able to serve 205 guests.
We have an outbuilding that actually will have 20 private rooms, and those are for guests who have really established stability. They have savings, they're employed, and they're stuck on a waiting list for housing. Then the main campus building is for our single men and women, and it also includes the medical dorm, the recovery room, the well-being room, the art and music room, the day shelter, the computer lab, the laundry facility. So it's got everything for the single men and women. And then with a separate location, it's attached to the building, but it has its own entry and exit, is the family building. It's a 2-story building that will serve families with children, and we can serve about 100 guests in that portion.
The most important piece is that instead of just a nightly shelter, which is their current model, the new shelter will give unhoused guests a place to be day and night.
You can come and go for school, work, like doctor's appointments, whatever, but there's always a place to come back to, which is really important in stabilizing someone during their unhoused time.
She says having all different resources on one property will help eliminate barriers for unhoused guests' journey to recovery.
She says if everything stays on track with the project, they're hoping to open the new campus, like shelter, September of 2025. Brian.
Okay, so they've been using the Red Lion downtown for the space to make up what they don't have in their current facility.
Right.
They've been given a little bit of leeway with these places, right? To kind of keep going this long and still using them.
They have, yeah. And once the new shelter opens, they'll move everyone from their current emergency shelter off into the new shelter, and then over at the hotel, they're on contract, and that will end once everything is set to go at the new place as well.
So everybody's kind of giving them that kind of benefit of the
Yeah,
doubt.
they'll have a few months to be able to move it all in.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Aspen. Well, we are still waiting to see what the U.S. Supreme Court decides on Idaho's abortion ban, with the DOJ claiming it violates the federal EMTALA rules. But the Supreme Court did decide on another abortion matter, the first since their last decision triggered Idaho's law. Abby Wild has the details on today's ruling on abortion medication and the rest of what you need to know in today's 411.
Big news out of the Supreme Court this morning. In its first case on abortion since overturning Roe v. Wade, the Supreme Court justices unanimously agreed to keep access to a widely used drug for medication-induced abortions. The drug, known as Mifepristone, is one of 2 drugs used in nearly 66% of all abortions last year. The case stemmed from a Texas judge's ruling last year to move Mifepristone off the market. A group of anti-abortion doctors claimed the drug put women's health at risk, but the Supreme Court froze that order until it heard arguments this past March. The government argued that Mifepristone had been on the market for more than 20 years, with decades of evidence to prove the drug was safe. More than 6 million people have used Mifepristone since 2000 as part of a 2-drug regimen to end pregnancies. The Idaho Republican Convention kicked off today in Coeur d'Alene and runs through Saturday. Every 2 years, party delegates from around the state talk about rules, resolutions, platforms, and vote on executive leadership at the convention. There are also workshops throughout the 3-day event for things like grassroots activism, strategic metals, and the dangers of ranked choice voting. We'll let you know if any big changes are made. The Idaho State Board of Education has set the minimum number of instructional days for K-12 public schools in Idaho. This is because several Idaho school districts are moving to a 4-day school week. The board set the minimum number of days as 152. They picked this number because it's in between the average days for schools with 4- and 5-day weeks. Schools have until July 1st of next year to meet the board's minimum instructional day requirement. You won't see a familiar sight at Ann Morrison Park after today. Boise Parks and Recreation said crews removed the clock tower so they can restore it. Then later, the clock will be installed back in Ann Morrison Park south of the fountain. And a friendly reminder that this Sunday is Father's Day. If you're spending time with your family in the Treasure Valley, then check out our Father's Day event guide right now on ktvb.com. There's something for every dad, including car shows, barbecues, live music, and more. Happy Father's Day to all. And that's the 411 on the 208. I'm Abby Will.
3.5 months ago, Thomas Creech narrowly escaped death. Idaho's longest-serving death row inmate was supposed to be executed, but after 8 attempts, an Idaho Department of Correction medical team was not able to get an IV into him. Creech and his wife reached out to investigative reporter Morgan Romero recently. And Morgan, he said he wanted to share what that experience was like, waiting for that to happen, and then kind of tell his life story in the process.
Yeah, exactly. When I asked him why he wanted to do an interview with me and kind of share this message to the public, he said, well, he's been fighting for his life for 50 years in max, and he said the state has always told their side of the story. But let's not forget, Thomas Creech is convicted of 5 murders and accused of many more. He admitted at one time to killing 42 people, but told me he only testified to that because his attorney at the time struck a book deal and told Creech they'd make money off that story. Creech says he hoped that money could pay for his wife at the time to move from the Oregon State Hospital to a private hospital. When he was sentenced to death in the early 80s for killing a fellow inmate, an Ada County judge said Creech, quote, intends to keep on killing and can't be stopped. But decades later, he says he wants people to see he's a changed man. On February 28th of this year, after a death warrant was signed, Creech says he fully expected to die in that execution chamber. But the IDOC medical team couldn't get an IV in his veins to insert the lethal injection drugs. And nearly an hour after they started the process, they called it off.
You have bad veins. Like, this is something that IDOC knew, and this is a health issue you have, correct?
They've known this even when they did blood draws on me for diabetes and stuff. They had a hard time accessing the veins. So my attorneys had warned them about this, but apparently they didn't take it to heart.
So they tested you the day before the execution was planned, right? They tested your veins?
They came in with a machine that mapped the veins. It showed all my veins. I could see them myself. So it was really odd to me that they.
Tonight on the news at 10, Creech reflects on the failed execution and the murders he committed decades ago that landed him in Idaho's maximum security prison. I'll bring you that one-on-one interview in the first part of our 2-part series coming up tonight.
I know, Morgan, there's a lot of people watching this story, and the one tonight at 10 are going to think, what kind of sympathy are you trying to get?
Right.
Or is he trying to get with this?
Right. Well, I mean, he claims he's remorseful, right? He claims that the person that he was when he was 24, when he committed those first murders, and then when he was in prison and killed that other inmate, he claims he's a completely different person from that guy. That guy acted impulsively. He was cold-blooded. He was seeking revenge. But it's a fair critique. It's a fair comment for people to say, why should you give this guy airtime? But I think from our perspective as journalists, this is extremely newsworthy. This made international news. A state-sponsored execution failed. Taxpayers funded this. It didn't work. The state now has to go back to the drawing board, and we're able to hear from the person that survived that, essentially.
And I think anytime you hear something in their own words, I think
Correct.
that's valuable. So
yeah,
It
absolutely.
should be interesting. All right, well, stay tuned. Thanks, Morgan.
You bet.
Typically, when we get weather this warm, it's sometimes accompanied with conditions that give us bright blue skies with those clear conditions. And you can see that is exactly the case over in Sun Valley, making for some picturesque views, of course, but certainly feeling hot today. We've seen some of those clouds increase across the Magic Valley and in part of the Central Mountains, but we will be seeing big changes as we go into the next few days. So tomorrow things will still be staying on the hot side, but then we have significant cooling throughout the weekend and into Monday. Also, we'll see the breezy winds return for the valley. So for the Magic Valley, those gusts will be close to 40 miles an hour once again. And then we have more widespread shower chances that will be coming on Monday. So here's where those temperatures are right now. We're in the 90s in many valley areas, and we just got into the 90s over in the Magic Valley as well. So things will be staying hot. And because of the heat and some of the hotter conditions, we're also seeing some chances for thunderstorms. And that's also going to be because we have some moisture that is tracking in along with the rotation of a high pressure. So the heat and the moisture are going to lead to some thunderstorm chances. So we have some of that bubbling up now in south of the Magic Valley. And so that potential lingers as we go into the evening hours tonight. You can see that popping up on this model data here, and also continuing a little bit more on the showery side into the early morning hours of Friday. And so we do have the changes on the way. Here's that cooler air starting to work its way in through the weekend. Again, Saturday and Sunday, we'll see those breezy conditions return. So any outdoor plans will be feeling much more like what we saw in the early spring and not what we've seen for the past 2 weeks. And Monday feeling exceptionally cool for us. So here's your 7-day forecast. Here's that dramatic cool down. And you can see, again, mid 80s expected tomorrow, but then low 70s through the weekend and even 60s expected for some spots as we start the new week.
All right, welcome back. We got about a minute or so for your comments. Got a lot of comments, especially about Thomas Creech. We'll get to those in just a second. We'll start with this one. Does Interfaith Sanctuary, their new home, they plan on having any type of medical care on site 24/7 for mental health plus any type of medical issues? That's a question for Vicki. Yes, they are. They're having both. They're going to have a medical facility plus they're going to have classrooms dedicated to mental health as well as recovery. So that is also included. Now they have more space. They can do more of that. Very happy for Interfaith Sanctuary. Their services are very much needed in our community. Just can't shake the thought, though, that Interfaith bought the building and then asked for forgiveness later. They should have talked to the community, gotten all the approvals before buying the building. That still rubs me the wrong way, says Bobby in Boise. We talked about this before as well. They basically jumped on it because it was available. If they had to go through that entire process for years and years like they did, that building may not still be available, so they would have lost that opportunity. So they took the chance they did, hoping they could convince the city and the neighbors that they would fit into the neighborhood. It is refreshing to see a bank loan money to a facility that is dedicated to helping people and families that can't afford the record high prices for rent in the valley. There are always two sides to every story, even if it's about a guy on death row, says Steve. Yes, a lot of comments on Thomas Creech. Not many as favorable as that one. Thomas Creech is a multiple murderer. Maybe talk about his victims instead, says Jan from McCall. Similar to this one, do you plan on interviewing any family members of the people Thomas Creech killed? It would be interesting to find out how they feel about him seeking all this attention, says Mary from Nampa. We have talked to a couple of them. You can find those stories at KTVB.com. Now that the firing squad is an option, his veins shouldn't be an issue in the Creech topic, says David in Nampa. Problem is they haven't built that facility yet. They still need to spend that $750,000 to build a firing squad facility. Still hasn't happened, so looks like injection's the only way so far.